Tim, listen, I know you probably don't have a lot of feelings on the college football playoff selections.
Who, me?
I know you probably just barely caught it, whatever. But just your thoughts. I think you're probably in line with what 2/3 of this of the lady ballers are in line with here.
Well, let's begin with a couple of things, okay? Let's begin with just a couple of things. There was a time in my life, and maybe even in my career, okay, where I really cared what others thought. I don't anymore. I really don't, okay? When it comes to college football, I'm going to say what I see and say what I think. And I will always offer up context to support whatever my thoughts are, okay? So I'm on with you because you give me a bit of a platform, and thank you for that.
Oh,
but I'm not on ad nauseum all day and all night, okay, as was the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference all day Friday and all day Saturday. And what I felt was really contrived, well-formatted and plotted television to not just make a case for Alabama worthy to win, but for both of his SEC teams to get in. Okay. So I don't nearly make the rounds or do as good of a job, with the platform given me as he does with the platform given him. So bravo, okay, to Commissioner Sankey. Did anyone hear the question asked of him yesterday by anyone, or for that matter on Friday with McAfee or anybody else? Hey, do you think with these two teams maybe possibly being on the outside looking in, that having that 9th game in the conference this year might have made a difference? Did you ever hear that? Was that question ever asked by anyone?
I didn't hear it.
No. It was like sitting in on a Joe Biden press conference. Nobody was going to ask the tough question. And if they did, they got shut down. Okay, you weren't going to get he wasn't going to answer that question. Why didn't anyone ask that question? I mean, if you're going to be on the air as much as Commissioner Sankey was on the air, you would think at some point a tough question might have come his way. It wasn't coming. I got no problem with Alabama getting in, okay? I really don't. I do have a problem with how syrupy and how contrived this whole thing was as it related to stiffing a 13-0 team for the first time in the history of the playoff process. That a team could drop exponentially as far, almost as far, as far, okay, as a 13-0 Florida State team did. Only the TCU drop in 2014 was close. They dropped from 3-6, and another pure playoff privilege team, Ohio State, jumped in after walloping Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. Pure playoff privilege. And 9 games versus 8 games. See, they know what the data is. And one of the reasons why, when you think about the circumstances surrounding what Commissioner Slive had in mind when they stated 8 games was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The metrics are all in our favor. Let's just play 8 games. Okay, because our conference is so much more powerful and the metrics are so much more on our side, it won't matter what the other conferences do. If you play through the ACC, your metrics are going to show your strength of schedule being what it is. So what Florida State did against 13th ranked LSU, a top 15 team, in a non-conference game they did not play. I know you felt this way, Jake. I certainly said it. That game was insurance for Florida State. That they knew when they won that game, if LSU finished in the top 15, they should be good. They shouldn't have to worry. They would be in the college football playoff, or contraire. No. You're not one of the pure playoff privilege. Florida State, there was a time when, with Bobby Bowden, that you were in college football's elite. You were away from it for too long. You now are no different than TCU, who, by the way, was really no different when we look back on it than Cincinnati, because St. Saban wasted no time last year after TCU was buried in the final by Georgia, talking about how, I think we probably should have been in. Oh, wait a minute. Did we just forget that TCU beat Michigan? Apparently we did. College football is about matchups. So there was a blowout. Blowouts happen. But we were going to hang that on TCU, and we were going to hang that also on whoever was going to be the next TCU, who in effect was the next Cincinnati. We treated a so-called Power 5 team, we being college football fellas, like a group of 5 team.
Mm-hmm.
We condescendingly looked down our noses and said, you don't belong. And then in the aftermath of it all, once it came down, I'm watching the quartet in the studio there. Only Booger McFarland would speak real truth.
Yeah.
And he spends more time covering the NFL than the other guys. Everyone else is giving the company line, the marching orders, just as it should be. And God forbid anybody come after Kirk Herbstreit and challenge him on anything. You know, Kirk's amazing to me. I have the greatest respect for him as a broadcaster. He does a hell of a job calling games. No one works harder going from place to place, now wearing all the hats that he's wearing. But he's got a level of sensitivity that is, he puts out a tweet shortly thereafter. He looked like he was so sad that Florida State didn't get in. And it was just, I don't know who worked with him on that sensitivity training, but boy, oh boy, it worked. See, I'm going to say what I see, and I'm not going to worry about what the fans or the players or coaches think. Spencer and I have a little something we call creative tension. Okay? We're not always going to agree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we don't. There are times when Tillman and I really don't agree. But I think it makes for good TV when people don't agree, as long as they are debating about it in a civil manner, and they go about their business making their points and then move on. It was as if none of those guys, okay, other than Booger, was going to point out that, wait a minute, this is a travesty. Mm-hmm. What we've done here is absolutely, this is one of the saddest days in college football.
Yeah.
He was the only one that made any statement like that. And again, I go back to these metrics. They know, the commissioner knows, because of the strength of his conference, what that so-called analytics thing is going to point out. That strength of schedule on Alabama is greater than that of Florida State, regardless of that Florida State game against LSU that you, Jake, thought was insurance, but really wasn't, because it was Florida State, not one of the pure playoff privileged. Not Alabama, not Georgia, not Ohio State. I could go on and on. Mm-hmm. And as long as this system was in place, it was going to screw itself. And I think it's fitting in the final year of the college football playoff that a team gets a screw job quite like this.
Yeah. Because
those kids at Florida State got absolutely screwed, and none of the pundits, with the exception of Booger McFarland on the air yesterday, was able to at least speak some truth to them while they were hanging their heads. And I do not blame Mike Norvell for stiffing them at all.
Yeah.
I mean, at what point was he going to come on and say anything that was not going to make him look even worse? And he knew that, and he was wise to not come on.
Yeah. Well, the only other person I saw push back against it was Dan Mullen, and I think he's about to be off to be a head coach here soon. So I don't know how many strings he has tied left there, but I saw guys I have a lot of respect for, including a former quarterback at Alabama who works for ESPN 4 days ago. And we'll play the clip for you tomorrow just to show you how this works. 4 days ago, coming out and saying, for the sanctity of the sport, Florida State needs to get in. It's only right. And then 4 days go by, and yesterday on the selection show, he's sitting up there in the booth talking about how it's just right that they're in. Somebody got the memo. I get it. I'm not an idiot, right? They're in the business of making money, but I couldn't do that, Timmy B. I can't play both sides of it like some of these cats can. I can't sit here and be like, cry me just crocodile tears for Florida State, but Alabama, here we go. I can't. Like you, I'm going to tell you what I think, and good, bad, or indifferent, I'm gonna go with what I believe. But you saw so many people flip-flop and then just lay down. Just lay down like a good dog. That's a good dog. Say what we want to say. It's sad. Here, go hit the doggy door. Go outside. Go to the bathroom outside, then come back in. Let me put some more water in your dish. Yeah. It's a joke.
It is. And you know, I go back to this. creative tension is a good thing. It makes for good TV, spontaneity. Okay, say some surprising things. That's why the TNT show is so good. With Charles and Ernie and those guys, because you don't know what's going to be said. I don't even think they know what's going to be said. I guarantee you that thing was completely rehearsed over and over and over again. Yeah, and everyone
best
was
place
in tow.
since Rent.
Yeah, the bottom line, that's great. That was a good one. Bino used My Fair Lady. Rent, very good.
Thank you, Bino.
Bottom line, and by the way, couldn't we have used Bino yesterday?
Oh man, it would have been great.
He would have just unvarnished truth and would have made everyone on that set uncomfortable. At one point, when you're doing 4 hours, and this is another thing, for Reese Davis, when you're doing 4 hours, at some point, your guys are going to go in a different direction and off script. And once they did, he said, we talked about this in the meeting. This is the only time I get upset. It's not about the competition. I'm like, oh, boy, there's a little truth serum coming out of the host. But it is just, I've been in the business too long not to know what's going on here. Herbie has now gotten so powerful that no one will disagree with him on the set, with the exception of Booger, who, by the way, was the only guy that left the set. I'm hoping it was because he had NFL duties. He had to get ready for an NFL show. And they put RG3 in. I waited throughout the entire show to see if they would get Norvell, and they didn't. And, bravo, good for him. I'm glad he chose not to come on, and he put out a statement instead. I wouldn't have given them the time of day either. I wouldn't have. Because that was so contrived and so, and whether you like it or not, it was mean-spirited. And I think that's why, if you haven't seen the video that Kirk put out, and by the way, like I said, I respect him. I do
think
too. He does a great job. But when you carry the mantle of the most influential broadcaster in the sport, which he does, and he was anointed by them, with that comes some responsibility to say what you see, and don't get syrupy with me and then apologize after the fact by looking all sad sack, telling me how badly you hurt for those kids. Just say what the hell you need to say and move on. That's the real world we live in.
Tim, what's most important to me is logical consistency in matters like this. Now, there's a couple things I think. The matchup with Michigan and Alabama now is going to be more compelling than the matchup with Florida State and a backup quarterback. Something else, I think most people can get on board with the idea that this team is not as competitive when their star player goes down. Most people can get on board with that. Where a lot of people like myself start to have issue is this would never happen if the roles were reversed. If you had an undefeated Alabama team, I don't care if their entire starting unit was ineligible for the playoffs. They would get in, and I would be saying the same thing I'm saying. I would say they deserve to be in over a one-loss Florida State team who played a difficult schedule or whatever the comparison might be. When we go to the 12-team playoff, you've been our shining light here talking about the 12-team playoff and how it'll probably be 16-team in the next 24 months. When we go to that, is that going to solve the issue? Not just because there's more teams. I really don't care how many teams there are. It's the selection mechanism to me, right? Like, is that going to help when we have automatic qualifiers and wild cards more like in NFL or Major League Baseball? Well, yeah, it's going to help. But this is proof that they got to blow up what their thinking is relative to how you go about it. Okay, it's this whole metrics thing that is in play, that the SEC really only needs to play its own schedule to be strong enough to fight off an undefeated conference champion. That's got to stop. That's got to stop. Now a conference champion will get in next year. That we know that. But will it come into play with the other conversation? Sure it will, unless they take a look at it moving forward, okay? But this is, again, let's not lose sight of this, all right? We're not talking about a one-loss Florida State. We're talking about a 0.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about 13-0. Yeah. All right? And we're talking about how much of a layoff between now and the games for the kid, the second teamer, to come through concussion protocol, right? So Florida State will be without Travis, yes. But can you win with a backup quarterback? Can it be done? Of course it can be done. Listen, fans, and I think everyone that is involved in college football or that wants to be involved, at least in the postseason, they really get annoyed when it becomes evident that the guys on the screen, okay, have that much influence over the games that you see at home.
Yeah.
And because Florida State makes for a, quote, poorer matchup, okay, in a 1-4 game against Michigan than Alabama, okay, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have to see that game, that it's not right for Florida State to be playing that game. Broadcasters I don't have the right to determine who Fox puts me on a game with. And if they tell me that I'm going to go do this game, I got to go and do the game. What do I like some matchups over others? Sure I do. When you're sitting in the lead chair, as Herbie does, and at our place Joel Klatt does, yeah, you're going to have a voice within the offices there, in those walls, and you're going to have a chance to say, gosh, I really think we ought to do this, and maybe somebody will listen. Okay, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But by and large, America doesn't want to believe that the broadcaster has that much influence. Okay, and that's what happens when you see that kind of charade played out on national television, and that's what it was. It was, without question, Alabama, this went on for weeks. This was set up over weeks. And then during the week, the commissioner of the conference made all the rounds. It was like going through the car wash of management at ESPN. He was hitting every spot. And that's his job. Okay, that's Greg Sankey's job. So I'm not going to be as critical of the commissioner.
I don't blame him for politicking. I'd be trying to get Ole Miss in too.
Absolutely. That's his job. And by the way, Tony Petitti and Jim Phillips and all the other commissioners, Brett Yormark, I think, gets it. He's pretty media savvy. This is what you do. Okay, you got to do it. He's got his own network now, and he can go on whenever he wants. Good for him. Yeah. But I think when fans are watching broadcasters, the people that are out there saying what they see and talking about the game, there is a responsibility that comes with the influence we carry. And to me, sometimes that influence can go over the top. And in this case, I thought it did. And I think creative tension is a wonderful thing. And I would have loved to have seen a few more people. You're right about Greg McElroy. I'd seen what he'd said, and I'm very high on Greg.
I got a lot of respect for Greg. I can't believe he flipped back and forth like that.
Listen, he knows who the big cheese is. He's sitting next to him. Okay. Yeah. It happened.
But he's rich. Didn't his dad invent unleaded oil or something like that? Or he's fine either way. It's like being Arthur Smith,
it was the
head coach of the Falcons. Didn't your dad start FedEx? I'd go for every fourth down. Hell, we'd go for it all. I'd be like Dan Lanning on steroids. You kidding?
Blake, you got some good stuff to say on this.
Well, yeah, I think Sean McDonough. I think Sean McDonough and Greg McElroy are the best broadcast team that they've got.
Greg knows. One of the best. I agree with that. I got a lot of respect for Greg. But
the bottom line is, fans just want to know that we're going to say what we see.
Yeah,
we're going to say what we see, and if it pisses some people off, so be it. That's the job we have.
Yeah,
that's right. So I would have loved to have seen a few more people besides Booger. As the only ones that threw shade towards this narrative that was allowed to be played out in such a manner, because it was a narrative all weekend long. I was doing basketball. All right, I had a basketball game in Wisconsin, and I was done with my homework. Got home in time to watch the shows around and before game day, and then I watched game day because I was getting ready for an 11:30 tip. So I got up extra early, had some breakfast, and I watched it all. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, my God, that was an infomercial for the SEC that they were doing. It was an absolute infomercial. And, allowing that kind of time. And listen, fans may not have cared or been able to read between the lines, but the committee, that's all they cared about. That was certainly all Greg Sankey cared about. And he was speaking directly to them when he was talking about that in the wake of that show and the way the show was formatted. And to me, it was just, somebody questioned the commissioner on, hey, you only played 8 games. Back in the spring in Destin, you kind of flipped the script. You thought you had everybody thinking you were going to play 9. Is there any reason why? He could have easily said, well, why would we do that? Alabama already has a strength of schedule of 55, and that's better than Florida State's. We don't have to worry about that. He could have at least answered the question. Okay. When the metrics are always on your side, you can get away with it. Those FCS games that we pine about in late November, okay, that are played, they don't mean a damn thing. The SEC still gets away with it. They've gotten away with it from the beginning, and they're still getting away with it today.
Well, I want to say this as a point that you brought up. If Michael Penix went down for Washington, or J.J. McCarthy went down for Michigan, I think they would get evaluated the same way if the roles were reversed and Florida State beat a number 1 team with a 1 loss in the ACC championship.
I think you might be right, but not Alabama or Georgia.
I think they would. I think Alabama would too. I think Georgia would as well.
You think they would keep Alabama?
I think they would get evaluated the same. I think they would get evaluated the same if their backup quarterback came and played the same.
You think they would keep an undefeated SEC team out that's coached?
I think they would evaluate the team if they played like that. Yeah, I truly believe.
I don't think there's a chance.
I don't think they wouldn't. They would do it against Michigan. Huge brand. They do it against Washington, huge brand. But if Bama and Georgia did it, they wouldn't do it.
I don't know. I still think Michigan would have gotten in. Michigan undefeated.
Hey,
Tim, what do you think?
Do you guys notice how many times the question comes to Boo Corrigan? Poor Boo. Replacing Bill Hancock is a very difficult thing. I think it's also important that Bill Hancock go out on such a controversial college football playoff. Oh, my God. The man that wouldn't allow us to say playoff for all those years during the BCS. But the question always comes up, do the coaches in that room have everyone's attention? Every year they ask that question. Huh? How many coaches are there really? Yeah. Versus how many administrators are there really?
Nick Saban's on ESPN every week. He's on the show. You going to tell me they're going to evaluate them the same? Are you kidding me? They're trying to get Nick Saban to go to ESPN.
But that's the problem.
Yeah, I really feel sad though for Feinbaum because he doesn't have the 7 figures to pay Nick that McAfee does to go on the show.
But the Saban dynasty was dead, according to Feinbaum.
But the fact that we're even having that conversation, that you're asking that question, like would they evaluate this team the same or that team the same, or what's the 4 best versus the 4 deserving, or who would Vegas favor? Yeah. It all speaks to a flaw in the mechanism as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Look, the big dog, whoever gets you paid the most, you're going to give them the most love, right? If I'm a paper company and whoever my biggest client is giving me the most paper, their first salesman goes down, they're still getting in, David. They're still getting in. Dunder Mifflin. The Michael Scott Paper Company.
Yeah. Underdog of our time.
Listen, I could have been, very easily, I could have been watching a Fox show, all right, rather than an ESPN show. And the guys might have said the same thing. In fact, I think they probably all did agree that Alabama should be the 4th team. And that's fine. Okay, but somebody offer up a legitimate argument that Florida State has truly been wronged here. No one did that. No one. And Booger, to his point, he was steadfast with it, but he wasn't going to get out of, he wasn't going to vilify his teammates on the set. He was just making a point that no one else was going to make. So it stood out. I think that fans don't like contrived television. And that's my critique here. Okay. Is I thought it was contrived. And I thought that it was painfully obvious that Herbie is the man and no one's going to challenge him when it comes down to it. And just because you're doing the best game every week on the biggest behemoth network doesn't mean you're always correct or that you shouldn't be challenged. Yeah. And when he got the pushback, obviously on social media, he felt that it was necessary to put out an impassioned response talking about how sorry and sympathetic he was to those Florida State kids. I just, to me, I was like, let me wipe the syrup off my iPad after watching it.
Yeah. I just hope it was Log Cabin, because that's the best. That or
it came up a little short for me.
Yeah. Well, Timmy B, you never come up short for us, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. It's basketball season. We're going to make sure to be checking in with you to see how that's going. Obviously, the transfer portal open. It's just absolutely nuts right now, my friend. Tell everybody where they can find you next.
Villanova and UCLA on Saturday night in prime time.
It's a good matchup.
So basketball's coming. It's here.
Fox.
It's here.
It is here. Yeah, the
Definitely.
games are always they're always good, and they're always great matchups. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. The most refreshing thing about college basketball is they get the end right.
That's
college
exactly
football
right.
still doesn't, and hopefully next year we'll get closer. And again, I really do believe that what we witnessed is another example of why we need more than one carrier of college football creating the narratives that are out there, because college football deserves better.
Definitely. Well, Timmy B, thanks.
Thank you, buddy.
We always love having you on, my friend, and enjoy the rest of your day. Tim Brando, one of the best in the business, always going to tell you what he thinks. Hey, YouTube, that's right. Got the Lady Ballers here. Maybe you didn't know we have a sports show, probably the best one you've ever heard about. Talk a little bit of everything. So thanks for stopping by. Going to be reacting to some clips from our new movie. It's got 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. Biggest launch in Daily Wire history. So go check it out if you haven't. Hit that subscribe button to this channel. Call us. Hop in the live chat. It's a hell of a time.